History is often presented as a monolith. We look back at black and white footage of the Third Reich, at endless columns of marching soldiers, the sea of raised arms, and the terrifying uniformity of a regime that seemed to move with a single dark purpose. We are taught that loyalty to Adolf Hitler was absolute, that his grip on the German military was total, and that the only threats to his life came from advancing Allied armies. But if you peel back the layers of classified files and forgotten memoirs, you find this is a lie. The truth is far more fractured and infinitely more dangerous. While the world trembled at the sight of the Wehrmacht, the most lethal threat to the Führer wasn't a Soviet tank commander. It was the man standing right next to him, the officer adjusting his map, the general signing his orders, the aristocrat sharing his dinner table. Deep within the German military machine, hidden behind iron crosses and stiff Prussian collars, there existed a ghost network. The Gestapo gave them a name: the Schwarze Kapelle, or the Black Orchestra. These men weren't rebels throwing Molotov cocktails. They were the architects of the war itself, heads of intelligence, quartermasters, chiefs of staff. By 1943, they had reached a singular, terrifying conclusion. To save Germany's soul, the man they had sworn to protect had to die. But how do you kill the most guarded man on Earth? How do you strike a target who wears a bulletproof vest, changes his schedule on a whim, and is surrounded by fanatical SS officers? You don't use a gun. You use a trick involving a bottle of Cointreau and a casual conversation between gentlemen. To understand this, we transport ourselves to the frozen Eastern Front in March 1943. The location is Smolensk, headquarters of Army Group Center. The atmosphere is bleak. Stalingrad's devastating loss has just shattered the myth of German invincibility. Soldiers are freezing. Morale is crumbling. But inside headquarters, a different tension is brewing. The central figure is Major General Henning von Tresckow. On the surface, he's the perfect German officer, aristocratic, brilliant, highly decorated. But beneath that veneer, he's a man consumed by moral fire. He has witnessed SS atrocities behind the lines, massacres of civilians, liquidation of Jewish communities, and decided he cannot simply be a soldier anymore. He must become an assassin. Tresckow had spent months recruiting like-minded officers, testing waters with cryptic conversations, looking for that spark of recognition that said, "I know what you're thinking, and I agree." By spring 1943, he had built a conspirator cell in the heart of military command. Then the opportunity arrived. Intelligence revealed Adolf Hitler was planning a rare frontline visit. He would fly to Smolensk. This was it. The moment where 20th century history could be rewritten. But killing Hitler was a logistical nightmare. Security protocols were suffocating. He'd be surrounded by personal SS bodyguards. His food was tasted. His routes swept. Getting a gunman close enough was a suicide mission with low success probability. If the assassin missed, the entire resistance network would be exposed and executed. Tresckow realized the assassination had to look like an accident, not a martyrdom, but a decapitation, leaving the regime confused and leaderless, allowing the Wehrmacht to seize Berlin before the SS knew what happened. They needed a bomb, but German fuses were noisy and unreliable. They hissed, ticked, or gave off smoke. The conspirators turned to the enemy. Through intelligence channels, they acquired British plastic explosives and time pencil fuses. These were ingenious devices, masterpieces of sabotage engineering. Silent, they relied on an acid vial that, when crushed, would slowly eat through a retaining wire. Once the wire snapped, a spring-loaded striker would slam into a percussion cap, detonating the explosive. No ticking clock, no burning fuse. Just silent chemistry. Tresckow and his aide, Lieutenant Fabian von Schlabrendorf, prepared the device. They molded two explosive blocks together, but they couldn't leave explosives lying around. They needed a disguise, something invisible in plain sight. They found a square wooden box used for expensive liquor. They placed the explosives inside, patting them carefully. Then they slid 2 Cointreau bottles into the box. It looked exactly like a thoughtful gift between officers. On March 13, Hitler arrived. The tension must have been suffocating. Tresckow had to salute the man he intended to kill, shake his hand, discuss maps and troop movements, while the bomb sat hidden nearby. During lunch, the conspirators had a signal ready. If one touched their cap, they'd trigger a bomb in the hall. But the moment never came. Hitler was too guarded, the SS too vigilant. Lunch ended, and Hitler prepared to leave. Panic set in. The opportunity was slipping away. As the entourage moved toward the airfield, Tresckow knew he had to act. He had to get the bomb onto the plane. But how do you get a package onto the Führer's personal aircraft, the most secure vehicle in the Third Reich? You exploit human nature. The code of the gentleman. On the tarmac, amidst roaring engines and flurry of salutes, Tresckow spotted Colonel Heinz Brandt, a staff officer traveling with Hitler. It was a gamble, but his only card. Tresckow approached Brandt, casual and relaxed, holding the wooden box. He smiled and asked a simple favor. He'd lost a bet to a Berlin friend, General Stief, and owed him brandy bottles. Would the colonel mind taking them back on the plane? Such a mundane request. In the rigid German officer corps structure, refusing a small favor was almost unthinkable. It wasn't a security threat, just brandy. Brandt didn't hesitate. He said yes. In that split second, the world's fate hung on a casual exchange. As Brandt reached for the box, Schlabrendorf covertly crushed the glass acid vial in the time pencil. The fuse was lit. The chemical countdown began. They handed the box to Brandt, who tucked it under his arm and walked up the Focke-Wulf Condor steps. Tresckow and Schlabrendorf watched the plane taxi. They watched it lift into the gray Russian sky, carrying the man who had set the world on fire and the small wooden box meant to extinguish him. The fuse was a 30-minute model. In 30 minutes, acid would cut the wire. The striker would hit the cap. Plastic explosive would detonate, blowing the tail off. The plane would plummet into Belarusian forests, and the official story would be tragic mechanical failure. They returned to headquarters and waited. Imagine that room's atmosphere. Every telephone ring, every hallway footstep caused adrenaline spikes. They waited for news that would change everything. They checked their watches. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. The plane should be down. 40 minutes passed. Then an hour. The silence was deafening. If the bomb had exploded, radio waves would be chaotic. Emergency calls, frantic messages, but there was nothing, just routine front chatter. Then the phone rang, a direct Berlin line. The message was short and devastating. The Führer had landed safely. The bomb had failed. For most people, this would be crushing defeat. But for Tresckow and Schlabrendorf, it was absolute terror. The failure didn't just mean Hitler was alive. It meant a box containing British military explosives was sitting in a colonel's possession in Hitler's inner circle. If Brandt opened the package, or handed it to Stief who opened it, the game was up. The Gestapo would trace the package to Tresckow in hours. The chemical fuse bore British markings. The entire Black Orchestra, hundreds of people, would be rounded up, tortured, and executed. Tresckow had to do the impossible, get the bomb back. He called Colonel Brandt in Berlin. Imagine the steel nerves required. He couldn't sound panicked. He had to sound like a bored officer correcting a minor mix-up. He told Brandt, "Colonel, terribly sorry, but there's been a mistake. Those bottles were wrong ones. Poor quality. I have the good stuff here. Please don't give them to General Stief yet. I'll send Schlabrendorf to Berlin tomorrow to swap them out." A flimsy lie, but it had to work. Next morning, Schlabrendorf boarded a courier train to Berlin. The journey must have felt like a lifetime. He was traveling into the lion's den to retrieve a live, explosive device. When he arrived, he went straight to Brandt. He carried 2 actual Cointreau bottles. The meeting was brief. Brandt, unsuspecting, handed over the wooden box. He hadn't opened it, hadn't checked it. He simply swapped packages, shook hands, and walked away. Schlabrendorf held the box containing his own death warrant and calmly walked out. He hurried to the conspirator's safe house and locked the door. Hands trembling, he pried open the wooden lid. He needed to know why it failed. He examined the mechanism. The acid vial was crushed, the wire eaten through, the spring released. The striker had slammed forward, but the percussion cap hadn't fired. A 1 in a million failure. Hitler's plane cargo hold was unpressurized and unheated. As the plane climbed a high altitude over Russia, the temperature inside dropped well below freezing. Extreme cold had affected the explosive's chemical composition, or the cap's sensitivity. When the striker hit, it was too cold to ignite. Hitler hadn't been saved by the SS, not by his own intuition. He'd been saved by thermodynamics. Schlabrendorf dismantled the bomb, defusing the device that almost changed history, and disposed of parts. Evidence gone. The plot remained secret. The Black Orchestra lived to fight another day, and they did fight. This makes Tresckow's story so haunting. They didn't stop. Most men, after coming within inches of being hanged for treason, would retreat into silence, focus on survival. But Tresckow was driven by conviction beyond survival. He famously told fellow conspirators, "The assassination must be attempted at any cost. Even if it fails, we must take action in Berlin. The practical purpose no longer matters. What matters now is that the German resistance movement must take the plunge before the eyes of the world and of history. Compared to that, nothing else matters." They tried again and again. There were suicide bombing attempts where officers volunteered to blow themselves up modeling new uniforms for Hitler, plans to shoot him at the Berghof. Finally, the famous July 20th plot in 1944, where Klaus von Stauffenberg planted a briefcase bomb in the Wolf's lair. After the failed attempt, the Gestapo dismantled the Black Orchestra. Conspirators faced show trials, humiliation by Judge Freisler, and brutal executions at Plötzensee. Henning von Tresckow shows a silence of a betrayal. Knowing torture would expose others, he staged a partisan attack and ended his life with a hand grenade on July 21. Before leaving, he spoke words that became the Black Orchestra's epitaph, a belief that moral worth begins only when one is willing to die for conviction. World War II is often framed as clear, good versus evil. Yet the Black Orchestra reveals a shadow war fought by men in Nazi uniforms, plotting Hitler's death through quiet gestures and failed bombs. Their brandy bottle plot failed, and Hitler lived on. But the attempt proved something vital. Even in totalitarian darkness, cracks exist. History forgets failed resistance, but those acts still mattered. If you want to uncover other classified attempts that textbooks ignore, subscribe to the Redacted War Archive. We are just getting started decoding the black ink.